back to WoodWorks. Now, we've been talking about cutting joints, so before we go too far into cutting different joints, what I want to say to people is at the moment it's not about cutting a perfect joint, it's about cutting the joint but learning the technique and the system of cutting the joint. So don't be too worried at the moment about getting things perfect, it's just going to come with practice. So we're going to look at some of the joints we've been doing, and the one we started with was a cross halving joint. We're going to move on from that, and although we had the basic cross halving joint, as you can see there are variations on it. You've got the oblique cross halving where it's cut at a slight angle, and then we have the T-joint halving. So it's very similar. All the techniques are the same. There's not a lot of difference in them. It's down to the angles that you cut at and the system you're using. So we're going to today vary that again, and I'm going to show you something just slightly different on the same basis, which is what's called a dovetail halving joint. So we're going to crack on with that, and I'll show you how to do it. It's all pretty much the same technique. Don't worry about getting them perfect. Just learn the process. That is where you need to start. With the dovetail halving joint being very similar to the T halving joint, the only difference being is that we're going to need to make a pattern to take our angles off of for the dovetail. So I'm going to show you how to do that first, how to set up, in this instance, a 1-in-6 or a 1-in-8 bevel that we can use. So I'm going to draw that out for you and show you how to do that. So marking out our angle for our dovetails, there's two which are pretty standard, which is a 1-in-6 and a 1-in-8. And they're pretty much the standard ones that you use for your dovetails. Obviously there are others, you can vary them if you wish. But the basic method for setting these out is to take a piece of paper, and what I would do is just put a dot on that piece of paper and put a square on the bottom edge and just run a straight line up your paper. We then measure out from the bottom, and we can do this in either inches or centimetres. I'm going to do this in inches just to make it clearer and easier. 1 inch from that corner. We will then measure up 6 inches from our baseline, and we will put another dot at the 6-inch mark. What we will then do is we will draw our line across between the 6-inch mark and the 1-inch mark. Now obviously if you're using a pencil it'll be a lot clearer and a lot more accurate. I've got to use a marker pen because obviously you won't be able to see it on camera, so it may not be as accurate, but it'll do the trick. Set our bevel gauge. So we'll line our bevel gauge up with the bottom line of the paper, and then we'll bring the blade of the bevel gauge up and align it up with the angled line and tighten it off. So as you can now see, you've got the angle of 1-in-6 marked on our gauge. Now that is a 1-in-6, and that is 1 inch across and 6 inches up to that point there. Now you can do this if you was doing it in, you could use 1 centimetre and 6 centimetres or multiples, so you would be doing 2 centimetres and 12 centimetres. If you was to do the same sort of thing but bring that up to 8 inches rather than the 6 inches we had there, keeping the same 1 inch, moving that up to the 8-inch line and connecting those two lines, that will give you a 1-in-8 with what we've got here, like I said, is a 1/6, and that is what we'll be working with. As you can see, this is the basic T halving joint, and that is the two components. One is removed on the lower half, and the other on the upper half. Now, the dovetail halving is going to be very similar, but it is going to have obviously the dovetail in the top. It will give it a little bit more strength. That can be pulled apart in that fashion, as well as that. When you're using the dovetail, it will not pull apart, it will lock, and the only way to remove it will be in the upward plane. So we will set this up, and I'll show you how to mark out for the dovetail. So as before, when we've been using timber, we've had a face side, face edge, and I can't stress that enough. They are really important. You need to be working to those. Where we've used this piece before, it's already pre-marked. We've already squared it. So we're going to determine now where our joint is going to be. So we're going to say, for argument's sake, we want to start at that point where our joint is going to be. So we're going to just very quickly pop a line across that. And then again, as we did before, we're going to set it up so that we're on our line. And we're just going to put a very small mark on that side, nice and tight in the corner. And that then gives us our reference point for setting in our second line. And we draw a pencil line across there as well. That is our start point. Now, that will be the area in which the dovetail housing will be cut out. When we're doing this, we need to cut the dovetail first. So we are going to go from the end of the timber, and we can line that up if need be, as that. Push that up, and we'll just put a little teeny mark on there again. And coming off of our face side, face edge, we draw our stop lines. That is the first one, and then we're going to do a stop line across the top and the bottom. So because we want to use the maximum width of the timber for the dovetail, what we're going to do is we're going to bring our bevel gauge onto the top, and we're just going to take this off right into that corner. So we'll set that on there, and we're just going to score a line down that, and we'll score our line on the other side as well, doing exactly the same. To that corner. Now what I would suggest when you're doing this is, really I should have done it first and shown you, but make sure that the top of the timber is like square with your square, and that will give you your marking for your angle of your dovetail. What you need to do then is to split the difference between these in half. So we need to find the centre point of that line. So what we're going to do now, after setting up our marking gauge for the centre line, which we did before, we're going to come off of the face side again, and we're going to score down our centre line. So we drop our centre line in, down to our pencil line. Good deep scoring. We do it again across the end grain, which is a little bit harder. We go right across the end grain, and then again turn the timber round, and off of the face side again we run in from the line to the edge, that gives us our halfway mark all the way round. So we can just very carefully just run our pencil down it, just to highlight it slightly. Just make it easier to see when we're putting the saw cut in. And what you've got to remember as well is when you're doing these cuts, every cut you make, you want to make on the waste side. So you don't want to be cutting on your face side. If we're removing this back, we need to make sure the saw cut is on the waste side of our line, so that you are literally just showing your line when you've cut it. And that way you'll get a good tight fit on your joint. So as before, we're going to cut in our knife wall on the side that we're removing. So this is the back side, the face side is down, and we're going to remove this side. So this is the side that we want to put our knife wall in. So we're going to cut that in nice and deep, and again using our chisel, we're just going to pop our little line in there. Flick that out, and again up from that centre line we're going to do the same. So I'm just going to, rather than use a knife, I'm going to use a chisel, line that up and just give it a little push in and flick that little corner out. It's literally just to stop the tear out when you run the saw down it on the sides. And that removed will make that a nice clean cut. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put a cut across here with the saw, and then we're going to remove this back section. So as I said, the first thing I'm going to do is to put the saw cut in across this line here. And we're just going to take that down just below our halfway mark there. And nice and gently just above the halfway line, just to give ourselves a little bit of clearance. It's at that point, it's taking your time, not rushing, just to get that to that line. And we're now on the line. So now we're going to revert to actually taking this whole cheek off of the top of the wood. Now this is the side that we're going to be removing. So we need to make sure that our saw cut, as you see the centre line there, is on this side of that centre line. So we're not actually cutting. We want to still be able to see this pencil line when we've made the saw cut. So as we're making the first cut, we want to cut it off the corner just to get that straight line. We can steer the saw down our line and make our first part of the cut, but not to go too far. Then we can turn it around and do exactly the same on the other side. Again on the waist side. Just gently steer the saw to where we want it to go along the lines. Constantly correcting it. And once we've got those two lines, we'll bring that upright. And we'll start just slightly down and come down into this cut at the back. can then continue to cut quite a way down. And then take the angles again. Just taking little cuts at a time, you should get a nice square cut. And if you just lower your saw and you bring it down to your line, and then again the other side. As you can see, coming down to our line, stop, bring it up right, and we can follow our cut right the way down. Keep a little bit of pressure on the bottom of the joint and it won't tear out. There you go. That's the first part of your lapping done. And now we're going to mark out to cut out the dovetail. As you can see, we don't want to cut the whole of this dovetail and mark it across here. So what we're going to do is we bring our square up to give us a level edge so that we're equal on both sheets. We're just going to take a little knife wall up into the shoulder of the dovetail in that fashion, and then continue it again on this side. We're then going to bring that down the sides. Now we could have done that before, but if the line had been slightly out we wouldn't have got it spot on, so I would say do it after. Mark these separately after. We do the same again on that one. Up our line, it's level. And then again what we're going to do is take out a little nick on there to get our saw cut started. Clear that out. And then again we're going to do the same with this one, but this time we only need to be going from the line to the edge. Just a very small cut in there. Again on this side. That gives you a nice clean cut into that corner. So we'll now make a cut on these. Just very gently down to that line. Same on this side. Okay, Now there's two ways of actually removing these shoulders, and you can either start off by putting a saw cut down them, or you can do them with a chisel. So I'm going to show you how to do these with a chisel. So we're going to remove this, but we're going to do it with a chisel. We're just going to do it in small sections at a time, keeping the chisel flat against this face, and just very carefully, with a sharp chisel, just very gently, small pieces at a time, pare it out. Moving back slightly every time. And what you're aiming to do is stay parallel to this line with your chisel. So once you get that angle back far enough, just gradually pare it down. And as you can see, taking your time, you can get a nice clean finish across there. And that is a part of your dovetail. So as you can see, you don't necessarily need to be tearing into it with a saw and going mad with a saw every time. You can use a chisel just to take it down and make that a nice smooth finish across there. As long as you keep it nice and square, parallel to your line, you should get a nice finish. And it's not about rushing, it's about taking your time. So we'll now turn this over, and I will cut the other one with a saw just to show you the difference. So as you can see, we're now cutting this one with a saw, and we just angled it slightly in the vise so that we're cutting the line in the vertical, not at an angle. Nice slow easy start, and pick up your line. And that's the two methods for cutting down your line on your dovetail. Now another little trick I'd like to show you is just something that I use just to get down to this line nice and level and get it nice and square if you're sitting just above it. And that is a block that I've cut, a piece of hardwood, and I've cut it like that, and it's got a nice square edge. And all we do is set this piece in the vise so that this face is just on your line. And once we've got the line above that, we can then use that so that it stays square. Just use the chisel to just very gently pare it off level with that, so nice and flat, and you get your nice straight cut. And you can use that right away across there. As long as it stays level with the top of your block, you've got a nice flat cut down your line, and you can set that for any line you like. That's a way of getting down to your line without over cutting, because you've already set your depth on your block. So as long as your chisel follows your block, you get a nice straight line, nice straight cut. And you just pare that off level. And that little teeny block will slide with your chisel, and it's forming like a bit of a rebate plane. So as it would cut, it cuts nice and level. And there you go, one finished dovetail, all nice and square, just by using that block. So now it's time to actually cut this dovetail into the housing on this side. So what we're going to do is we're going to place that over the top, and we're going to line up this side of our wood with our shoulder line, and the same on this side. If we can get those nice and square, hold that down tight, and we're then just going to run in a little pencil line that side, and again on that side, and then using our dovetail gauge or our sliding bevel, we can just come into that, just put a little line in there, get that nice and straight, and check that one, do exactly the same there. And what we're going to do is we're going to remove this halfway down. So again, with the face side up, we're going to run our line with our marking gauge so that we've got the same depth again, and we'll turn that round. We'll do the same on this side, but only between these two lines. And then we'll drop our squaring lines down from those to our halfway line. We'll then turn that over, and we'll do exactly the same again. And then if I just run a pencil line down there, and again there, this is a section that we need to remove, and we'll go to that the same as we did before, putting our saw cuts across there to break out that centre. So again, cutting across there, we do the same as we normally do, drop the knife walls in, but this time using the bevel gauge to give us our angles. So we cut those in exactly the same as we did before. And that again will stop the tear out. And that goes on the waist side, the angle goes on the waist side of the knife line, as you can see. We'll do the same again, dropping down into those, but only up to halfway, up to the halfway line. We do that on both sides, on both edges. and then we make our cuts down into that, just below halfway again. You want to be just above your line, like I said before, just so we don't break that line. And then take out some sections in the middle. As you can see, these ones are all down just above the line, and we're going to check the other side, and we're going to adjust that accordingly. Just bring those down as well. That's it, so they're down to the line on both sides now, so now we can break this out, same as we did before. And just gently squeezing them out. Hook those out of there. And then again, just above, and very carefully just flick those out. And then what we can do is turn around and just nip in a few from the other side. Remove those, and then we can square that with a nice flat chisel. So now what we're doing, we're just leveling the bottom of this out, keeping the chisel nice and flat. Just gently shave it out. Again, don't go too far, because this will determine how level your joint is. So you just need to take the rough out first, and then we'll try it and see how much further we've got to go with it. Just keep an eye on your line that you don't go too far down. We can align that, and we can see roughly where we're going. That's it. Okay. See, I've got a little bit high on that side, so we'll knock that out. Now we'll take it out of the vise and we'll give it a try. So I tested the depth of the joint. It still needs a little bit more taken out, so I'm just going to shave another little bit off of there until we can get it down to the height that we need, or the depth that we need, not the height. I'm just going to shave into that. In doing that, we're just going to shave down these edges, take all those loose pieces out. And I'm using the top of the vise, this surface, as me line to work to, and that's also keeping the chisel nice and flat. Go for a slightly narrower chisel for the outside. Run the knife into the corner to remove any loose fibres. So now we'll try that joint again and we'll see how far it goes. So as you can see, these are our 1 in 6 lines, and these in the pencil line are the ones which will lay out for the width of the timber. So if we take that out, you can see that's half the depth of the timber there. These pencil lines were our width, and these that I've marked with a black marker are the ones that we cut using the angle that we've got from our 1 in 6 that we made up on our gauge. So that gives us our angle, and that is a dovetail halving joint. So today we've done the dovetail half lapping joint, and it's all based on the same principles as a cross halving joint. There is a lot of joints that you can cut from the same simple technique. So as I said before, a lot of it is not about accuracy at the moment, it's about the process and the order in which you do things. Just practice, keep practicing, you'll get it. It'll turn out in the end. If you've enjoyed watching cutting this joint, next time we're going to do a totally different set of joints. We're going to be looking at mortise and tenons. So if you want to know how to do a mortise and tenon, I'll show you a quick route for that. In the meantime, if you've enjoyed what you've seen and you'd like to join us again, like, subscribe, click the little bell down below and you'll get notifications of every time we put a video up. So look forward to seeing you again. Thanks for watching.